Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the show where ambition meets alignment. I am your host, Erin Coop, and today's guest is Jamie Hess. She's a TEDx speaker, a media personality, and host of the Gratitudeology podcast that I really enjoy. She's also been featured on Today's Show and many other places. You would definitely know her on Instagram, and we will share her handle later. After 17 years leading PR and marketing for brands like McDonald's, LinkedIn, and W Hotels, Jamie turned her expertise into a thriving platform helping solopreneurs and thought leaders build powerful personal brands through her course, Brand Ninja. She's also a regular on QVC and a go-to voice for healthy, purpose-driven living on shows like GMA and The View. Jamie's story is all about heart, hustle, and alignment, and I cannot wait to dive in. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Yes, I'm so happy you're here. So I've been excited for this conversation because I've listened to your podcast for a while. I love the things that you talk about, all about purpose and, stepping away from what is draining you or what was that rock bottom or what was too heavy in your life that it was making you maybe someone that you weren't. And I thought that might be a great place for us to start with you is what do you want people to most understand about who you are and your journey?
Well, it's great to start kind of at the beginning. And I have kind of a fun mic drop moment, which is to share that I started my life as a hopeless and helpless, sick and suffering drug addict. And that's a mic drop moment for a couple of reasons. I think number one, if you read my bio, you'd be like, wow, okay, she turned that around. Number two, something that I often share just because it's somewhat relevant is that my mom is TV journalist Joan London, and she hosted Good Morning America for almost 20 years. She was kind of America's mom. She was like waving the American flag and holding the apple pie. And so people probably wouldn't have thought that Joan London's daughter would be this like down and out drug addict, but here we are. And I think that says a couple of things. Number one, addiction can happen to anyone. Number two, I don't think it's a secret that people that have high achieving parents can struggle with that. I think I was always looking up to her in a way where it almost felt so unachievable that I just did an exit stage left. And I was like, you know what? I'm out of here. And I think there's a lot of people who can probably identify with that, where it's like, have you ever looked up to somebody, be it a parent, be it a mentor, where it just felt so big and so daunting that you're like, you know what? I wave the white flag. And that's kind of what I did. And I went the other direction. That almost killed me. And it was a very scary time throughout my teens and my 20s. When I did get sober, which happened in my 20s, here's the coolest thing about recovery. So anybody who's listening right now who's in recovery will like give a little grin because they'll identify with this. Drug addiction or alcoholism is the only disease that you come out better on the other side than you went in. Like in other words, if you got cancer and then you just don't have cancer, then you're just in remission from cancer. However, with addiction, the cure leaves you better than you went in. So what I gained in my recovery journey was truly a blueprint for living. And what ended up happening, Erin, was when I took that back into the corporate world, I took the lessons that I had learned back into my corporate environment that I had just been barely hanging on to by a thread because I was like in my early days of PR and I was juggling addiction and being like a publicist. Then I go back as this new version of myself and I started falling up like almost by accident. And what I realized was I wasn't taking any new courses or getting new accreditations or doing anything particularly intentional. I was showing up as a new version of myself. And because of that, I started evolving in my professional life. And that's when I realized that the personal development journey is not woo-woo. It's really about furthering every avenue of our journey.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's a vulnerable story. And you and I were chatting before we started this about how we're kindred spirits. We both spent kind of 17 and a half years or so in the corporate world and, found eventually that there is a better way to go about living life. And we don't have to be our own worst enemy. We don't have to be people who are, in my case, I felt resentful every day towards a lot of different things, people, clients, colleagues, my husband, motherhood, all these scenarios in my life that I thought were draining me and pulling on my energy and attention and making me someone I didn't want to be. but ultimately choosing that you want to be yourself and you want to show up whole, that is a radical step. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of clarity. And clearly, you just told us how you gained clarity. You got sober, right? What would you say if you were describing what was that sort of wake up call or that moment, that shift in mindset where you were finally like, and I'm done. I'm exiting stage left, like you said, and I'm going to live a better life.
Well, my addiction was so much tied up with my identity. So for a
Mhm.
long time, that's all I wanted to be. I wanted to know the DJ and be on the guest list. You know what I mean? Like I was a
Yeah.
New York City PR gal. And so that was kind of also our calling. Like if you weren't
Oh,
doing
wait, you and
coke,
I also have that in common. I mean, I spent my
oh
20s
yeah,
in New York and every door
yeah.
guy was my buddy.
Hello. Uh, and
Hello.
and if you weren't like doing blow in the bathroom with the writers from Page Six, like you weren't because that was also the social equity. And I mean that. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that to be like even disruptive or like, to like shake people up, but it's like that was literally like if you weren't doing that as a
Mhm.
publicist, you were missing a moment that was kind of like an insider moment with the who's who of New York City. So it literally was
Yeah.
almost a pretense to doing your job right, was being
Right.
in those like secret rooms with those secret people. And so
Yes.
stepping away from that actually felt very scary, to be honest. It wasn't like something I was doing in secret. In fact, it was something I was doing to be a part of. So the defining moment was very visceral. It was one morning at 6 a.m. I was sitting on the side of my bed, sitting bolt upright. My alarm was going off because it was time to go to work, which was an absolute joke that the alarm was going off because I certainly had not been to sleep yet. And I'm looking around my apartment, and there's all these people from the club the night before, like in various stages of like, consciousness. And I'm just like, no one's coming.
Mm.
No one's coming to help me. Like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And this is my life. And as I put on what I call my costume, my like corporate drag, as I called it,
Yeah.
and teeter totter down the street towards the subway in my Manolo Blahniks, I was just like, I'm the only one who's in charge of fixing this. Like, no one is coming to save me. I texted a friend who had been in recovery and had told me if I wanted help, he would be there, but I had to reach out. And he said, okay, I got you. He goes, do you think you cannot use between now and the end of the day? I'm going to come get you and bring you to a meeting. And I was
Mm.
like, I'll try. And I couldn't do it. And he was like, it's okay. And he came and he got me and he brought me to my first meeting. And I cried through the whole meeting because I thought it was the end of the line. And what it really was the first day of the rest of my life in so many consequential ways.
Wow, that's so powerful. There's a lot coming up for me. I mean, I had a very good friend that was publicist for a very well-known restaurant in New York in those years. And, we were about the same age, although I was working on Wall Street. So it was, a different life, but still corporate. And that was the life that she lived, that, doing the drugs in the bathroom scenario. And man, was she fun because she knew everybody. And so it was great to go out with her, once every few weeks. But I built a lifestyle of work hard, play hard in a very different way. And it was by pounding the pavement nonstop and not sleeping. Right. And I just thought that I can go out to the clubs. I can, drink 10 drinks over the course of 6 hours and I can go to the nicest restaurants and then I can show up at the office at 6 a.m. and I'll just be fine. And eventually my body started to shut down. I started having fainting spells all the time in elevators, which was really dangerous when you fall forward and face plant when the doors open, right? Like really bad things were happening. Rashes that couldn't be treated with anything but steroids. That was awful. And, ultimately I had so many problems that were a lot of them were just mental. I was just anxious all the time. I was stressed out all the time. And I would blame it on the environment, like I said, but it was me that I had to change. I needed to do the inner work, the personal development, like you said, and step into that, right? And so when you got sober, you made those choices, you made those decisions. What are some of the shifts in your just daily life, like your ways of being that really started to fuel you and help you show up differently? Like the things that were like tangible and noticeable to you and to others.
Well, here's the coolest thing about like recovery and what you learn. I mean, first of all, you do the things because you're there to save your life. And so you actually do them. otherwise it's very easy to just kind of skip some of these things. For example, I mean, the very, very first thing is like they teach you to make your bed every day, which seems like duh, all grown-ups are
Yeah.
making their bed every day. No, they're not. Okay. But literally what that is in a larger scope is taking responsibility, and pride for the way that you show up in the world. And so
Mhm.
all of these little things that were just these small actions that led up to me putting my head on the pillow at night and feeling like
Mhm.
I conducted myself in a way in which I'm proud.
Yeah.
Um, and then most importantly, this is when I started understanding having a gratitude attitude is the heartbeat of happiness. I um I really, and like many people do, I really thought I was the victim. Like I
Yeah.
thought that the world had done these things to me and that I was just like I was using because life had been unfair and I had just been, had too much to live up to and like who could be like I really thought that. And
Mhm.
when you get a sponsor in recovery and the first time they tell you with the tough love voice that they need to use like, "Hey babe, um it's you actually have a part in this." And you're like, "Oh, who
Yeah.
me?" Like me? It is the most powerful realization. And so, little things. I always had a contentious relationship with my dad, and every phone call would end with like throwing the phone across the room and like hanging up on each other. And it's like my sponsor, I remember being like, "Okay, so a couple questions. Totally get it. He might be a very challenging person. Does your dad tell you that he loves you?" It's like, "Well, yeah, he does." And your dad is alive, I presume. I'm like, well, yeah, he is. Okay. Do you know how many people don't have that? Do you know how many people would kill for that?
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot to be grateful for there. And I was like, oh my God. It was like the first
Yeah.
little like glimpse, like the door opened to like a little like spark of gratitude. And I was like, oh, these little moments where I started developing gratitude instead of this feeling of like victimization. And it starts to permeate through the rest of your life. It becomes an intuitive part of your thinking where you become grateful for things, including the parts that suck. So, a lot of what I teach, and thank you for mentioning my podcast, the
Yeah.
Gratitudeology podcast. The reason I created that podcast is because I like to talk to celebrities, entrepreneurs, 8, 9 figure entrepreneurs and thought leaders um,
Yeah.
about the moment that the switch flipped and they started seeing life through a lens of gratitude. And how did that propel your business then going forward? And for me, having this understanding of gratitude changed everything. I'll give you an example. This is so funny, Erin, because you and I kind of escaped the corporate environment. And so sometimes I forget what it's like, okay, in there. And I can't get too far away from it because I speak to a lot of leaders as well as you do. And I
Yes.
sometimes I forget what it can feel like to be in there. So yesterday, okay, I'm on a phone call because I'm hired a lot as a consultant for events to do. I'm doing an influencer event in New York City. I'm hosting it and also as I'm acting as a consultant to plan this big event for a product launch. So I'm
Mhm.
in this call and it is just one of those calls, girl. I mean, there's about 13 people on the call and one girl is just the Wicked Witch of the West. She is just being
Uh-huh.
mean for the sake
Passive
of being mean.
aggressive.
And she's allowed to do it because of her title, because of the org chart, because of who reports to who. And she's just loving it. Like you can tell she is
Mhm.
loving it. And she is just so passive aggressive. And now me, I mean, I'm intimidated zero. And by the way, she's throwing a lot of the shade at me. And I'm like, bring it on, babe. Bring it on. Like
Right.
I'm not,
Right.
I don't work for you. So like at the end
Yeah,
of the day,
right. But it's
um,
because you're smart, you're pretty, you're articulate. Like
all of that. Now,
yeah.
that said, the old version of me would have still been rattled for sure. I would have felt personally attacked. I would have felt rattled. I would have felt upset. I would have felt demeaned. I would have felt angry. I would have felt nervous to then show up on the next call. The new version of me, because I have this little chip of gratitude as a part of my intuition, immediately when she started doing it, my first thought was, oh my God, I am so glad to be in this meeting to be reminded of what this feels like. So I can then go help
Mhm.
leaders, go help people, whether they're in middle management or leadership. I can help them because people on teams are dealing with this every single day. And number two, I was just grateful for the opportunity to show up on this call in the best way that I could and to really like kind of interpret this information and like store it in my brain to be like, oh, I'm going to need this later. I can store this. I didn't have to think about it. First of all,
Yeah.
my ego wasn't rattled, but second of all, I was able to learn to love the parts that suck this was a very annoying phone call. And not only did it not rattle me, I loved it. I was like, my God, this is so cool. I'm getting like a real life case study of this archetype.
You're like,
Because
can we
this
do
is,
this again
oh
sometime
my God,
soon?
please, next Tuesday, I'm totally free. Let's let's do it again because I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, it's something I laugh about now, but like that is a learned skill. That is a
Yes.
learned skill. And it is so important in the corporate leadership world and then also in life as an entrepreneur.
That's so true. It reminds me, there was this holiday party I went to several years ago at good friends of ours, and they had moved into a new area. So there's all these people that are new, that are showing up at this party. And somehow I got in conversation with somebody there, and there was a lot of that passive aggressive attitude, a lot of these like very pointed questions that I was just kind of like, I'm at a holiday party. Like, why am I being interrogated? Anyways, long and short of it, after 10 minutes, it happened to be a guy, and he like looks at me and says, "Oh, I'm going to go over there and grab a drink." And he's like, "But we should chat again sometime soon." I'm like, "Yeah, or never." And I mean, I am just like, I'm known in this stage of my life, and for the last decade of the inner work and all that change and transformation, I protect my peace, right? And I think what you're talking about here is a couple of things. One, gratitude is a practice that grounds you. It keeps you centered. It makes you whole. And you turn to that for that reason. And it's so powerful. And then the other thing is that you are protecting your peace by having that very intentional practice. You are protecting yourself from being mentally overloaded or emotionally drained by someone else's crappy energy, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, what are some other strategies or rituals that you have in your life that help you really stay centered, grounded, and also protect your peace?
One of the things I was taught early on in recovery is it's just about keeping your own side of the street clean, period. Right. So I cannot control how people are going to show up on a call, in the room, in the environment. The only person I can control is myself. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have to constantly evaluate my intentions. I have to constantly evaluate the energy that I'm bringing into the room and into the conversation. I have to constantly evaluate, am I doing enough? Am I bringing the best of me? And if the answer is yes, then it's enough. Then it's okay. At the end of the day, I feel like the reason that there's so much corporate speak and kind of the joke about like all of this corporate nonsense, like a meeting that could have been an email, is it's a lot of egos, and it's a lot of people that love to hear themselves talk. And at the end of the day, I by the way, I loved my corporate job. I actually didn't
Mm-hmm.
leave because I hated it. I actually loved
Yeah.
it. I loved it. I
Ditto.
was good
Yeah.
at it. Yeah, I know.
Right.
I could tell like our energy. Like
Yeah.
I was not unhappy, but I found a
Right.
happier version of happy over here on this side. But I find that there's a lot of inefficiency, a lot of wasted time in the corporate environment. A lot of programs where like we're really only talking to ourselves. Like we're coming up with this big initiative that really only exists on a deck internally, and actually like the outside consumer really will never even understand. It's like a lot of nuanced
Yeah. Like,
messaging
where's
that
the impact? Yeah.
yeah, never really makes it across that barrier. And it's a lot of like wasted time when you really look when it comes down to it. And what I love about being an entrepreneur on the other side of things is that I just get to be a lot more nimble. I get to
Mm-hmm.
really take a step back and be like, what actually matters here? What actually matters here? And by the way, that might be, does it matter to my bottom line? And also, does it matter to like me and my passions?
Right.
As an example, I have like 5 full-time jobs. Okay. So I am a media personality. I'm on the air. Like I'm literally on QVC in 2 hours. I will be on QVC selling Rosetta Stone language learning software to America. So I'm back and forth to QVC doing this crazy job. I'm a keynote speaker, a podcaster, a coach, an author, and a content creator. I was like, I know I have one more job.
Yeah.
Those are all their own paths. Okay. And I have to look at those and people are like, how do you do it? And it's like, it is an intentional exercise. And I look at things in 2 different ways. I look at my P&L, of course, right? I'm a considerate business owner, but I also have like a passion P&L, because at the end of the day, the project and the work stream that is bringing me the most money might not be the one that's bringing me the most joy or the most alignment or the most opportunity to be intentional and to make impact. And so I might not cut it. Like, in other words, I've been told before, you have to edit. You can't have all 6 of these work streams. And it's like, And there's times, by the way, my business is modular. There are quarters of the year where that is true. I might have to say, you know what? No new podcast episodes this quarter because I'm really focusing on my keynote speaking. But I do look and I say, I don't make judgments just based on financial implications. I make judgments based on the totality of the impact that I'm bringing to the world and my family and myself.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you and I are sisters from another mister with very different backgrounds because that is exactly how I view my business. And I look at it on almost an energetic level, right? First of all, fitting in what matters most. I mean, that's what I wrote the book on. And when you fit in what matters most, you're going to have the fuel, the energy, the restoration necessary to keep yourself focused and motivated and attentive to what it is you actually want to give yourself to, right? But then also, I love that you brought up that intentionality about selecting where you actually focus your energy, because sometimes there is just going to be too much that you can do. And if it is all about money, then of course that looks very, very different than if it's about how fulfilled does this feel because I'm also making an impact. I like to think about things from a place of like service, right? Like I'm serving in every way in my business at all times. The service is just different as far as who I'm serving and how I'm serving, right? But when you come at your business from a place of service, that is actually more in line with just being grateful that you get to be there, being grateful that you get to make that impact, right? So, what is, based on that, what is one truth that you really wish people would know about time or energy or intention? And what would you say is like that kind of that piece of advice you would have given to your younger self along with that?
Well, I really think this is about, it's a branding exercise. Everything's a branding exercise. Okay. So when I help people, I have two signature keynotes that I give on stage. One is about unlocking the power of gratitudeology, but the other is called Your Magnetic Rebrand. And it's about rebranding from the inside out. And so I encourage people to really take that step back, like that exercise that I just talked about, where I look at my P&L, but I also look at my passion P&L. I look at how I'm showing up in the context of a day, and I'm really trying to align that with my mission statement. Like, who do I want to be as Jamie Hess? Who do I want to be? Like, who is my family? Like, what do we stand for, right? As a family. And like, how am I showing up in alignment with that? And one of the things, as a for instance, that I believe in, like, I believe in hustle and ambition and making money, honey. Like, I love it. There's no shame in my game. And it's so interesting though, Erin, because like, okay, so I have this course called Brand Ninja, which I'm happy to
Yeah.
talk about in a second. But
Yes.
what I do in that course is, and to give you the backstory on that, I left my corporate job in 2019 because I had become an accidental influencer. What that means is I had gotten engaged on the treadmills at Barry's boot camp. My husband surprise proposed to me at Barry's. And that moment went a bit viral, had a bit of virality, grew my Instagram account, which was originally called NYC Fit Fam. Today it is my name, Jamie Hess. And NYC Fit Fam turned me into a fitness influencer. So I was doing two things at once. I was working in corporate and then also like as a side hustle, I was working as an influencer. Well, what a time to be alive. Within about a year, my side hustle far outpaced my full-time hustle. And I left my corporate job. I was pregnant, by the way. A lot of people, including my own mom, said, "You are crazy. You do not leave a multi-six-figure a year job with health insurance."
The judgment.
I said, with all due respect, I think it's going to work. And thank God, it would have been embarrassing if it didn't. Thank God, within 18 months, I had 5x my income. Now, for years, people were asking me if I could teach how I did that. And I was like, no, it's working for me, but I don't really want to coach on how to be an influencer. But I finally realized they weren't asking me how to be fluffy course on how to be an influencer. They were asking me to teach what I was uniquely positioned to teach, which was at the intersection of having been an influencer marketing specialist and a modern day content creator. That's why I was so quickly able to pivot and monetize this so highly, because I was the one hiring the influencers for McDonald's and LinkedIn and General Motors. So I know the types of programs I would want to be pitched, right? As that influencer marketing
Yes.
specialist. So finally, I created this course called Brand Ninja, and it has been just such an exciting, the last 2 years. I mean, let me tell you, that is the one skill that everybody wants to learn. So I have been full with the wait list, every single cohort that I've kicked off for the last 2 years, which has been great. It has also taught me a lot about people. And one of the things, and this is where it ties into what I was just saying about loving ambition and hustle and not apologizing for it. One thing I have learned in coaching people, it's not male or female defined, my course, but there's a lot of women in it, is how apologetic people feel like they need to be for wanting to make money. Like it
Wow.
is crazy. Like as
Yeah.
soon as you get outside of that, like getting that corporate paycheck and you ask people to show up and ask for what they're worth and demand, what they're worth for their work and their creativity and their bandwidth, they get so it's not just humble. They shirk back, they get shy, they get embarrassed, they don't feel worthy. And
Mm,
and one of the examples I often give is one of the things I've done well and why I've been able to monetize my Instagram account is because I've shared every moment of my journey and I have monetized, in other words, exploited, and it is not always a bad word, moments in my life that may have sucked. For instance, being pregnant, I sold to a bunch of baby brands. Why do I have to just be uncomfortable being pregnant by myself? Why do I not get to make a couple dollars sharing the products and services that work for me? I'm
yeah.
supposed to feel bad about that? That's exploiting my pregnancy? Yeah, sure. Okay. But then redefine the word exploit, right? It's
Right.
leveraging a moment that's leverageable to share what's working for me with my followers, which by the way, people loved. And I get to, yes, and I get to earn money in exchange for that. What a novel
Yeah. It's
concept.
not malicious exploitation.
No, it's
Right. I
not.
think we need to make that distinction. It's like, no, this is
Exactly.
benevolent. This is
It's
helpful. Right.
and I truly believe that, by the way, and that's
Yeah.
also what I think people need to get their heads around. There are certainly
Hmm.
influencers out there who are doing it wrong. 100%. There are
Yeah.
influencers out there right now, as you and I are sitting here recording. I just read an article about some two influencers who were flying to Jamaica where there's a category 5 hurricane about to hit. And they were saying, like, oh, this is ruining our vacation. That is doing it wrong. Okay. That is influencing wrong. They are taking resources away from the Jamaican population where they are about to deal with something horrible. Wrong.
Yeah.
But I think where you get into a gray area is it wrong that on my pregnancy journey or on my eczema journey, I had a terrible bout with eczema, which really, really riddled my life? Um, do I not get to then partner with an eczema company to share with my audience how that how that product really helped me? Is that bad? Because this is where people will come in your comments and say, influencers will exploit anything for a dime. Well, I don't know. If you have eczema and you found my page and I share something that helped you, I don't understand why that is a bad exchange of money for services. So for me, what I try to empower people to understand is forget what people say. People are just jealous that they're not able to do it. People get mad at influencers because it seems like, the path of least resistance, when in reality, you're a one woman advertising agency. It's actually a very hard job. I mean, hard
Right.
comparatively speaking. There's other jobs that are harder, but it takes a lot of professional effort and understanding, the business model. That said, I encourage people to step into their pride around it, to step into understanding that the world that we live in, right, in the year of our Lord 2025, the exchange of money for services of that nature is commonplace. There's a lot of benevolence to it, and you should be proud
Yeah.
to step into that. If you have figured out how to do it, how to relate, aspirational, attainable, that type of influencer where people are really following your life, warts and all, and you're sharing the real life twists and turns of your journey. And then you share products or services that you helped kind of use to navigate that.
Yeah.
Show up in that, like be proud of that and do it in a way that feels aligned, right? And if you're doing it in a way that feels aligned, then being an influencer can be very empowering. I think people that look at influencer partnerships as cheap or exploitative, well, those are people that are doing cheap or exploitative partnerships. But when you really look at it as you are essentially, the backdrop, the landscape against which these products can, advertise what it is that they do and how they work, it's really a very cool line of work to be in. And so I had a woman just yesterday, she has an eye infection and she was embarrassed because it's something that's been ongoing. And I said, well, what if we shared about this with your audience? She said it's been really hard for her to want to show up on social
Yeah.
media because she doesn't feel like she looks her best. And so I said, well, what if we flipped the script? What if instead of not wanting to show up because you feel like your eye is puffy, you took power in that and you said, hey, audience, I'm going through a dark time right now. Maybe you are too. Here are some products I'm using to either help with my physical ailment or my mental state around it, or with my sleep hygiene, or managing my anxiety around going outside. What if you took ownership over this
Mm.
problem with your eye And yes, monetized it at the same time because there's no shame in that. So you can see I'm very passionate about this, but I really mean it. I
Yes.
think that women really are nervous to step into this really opportunistic moment we have around earning money and sharing our lives. And it's actually very, very cool.
Yeah, well, your course sounds amazing. And I know a lot of people listening, I know I was sharing this with you before, but so many of, the people I've worked with in the past, both, as clients and also just a lot of like my friends and former coworkers, so many people have dreams and ideas for a business they want to create or a service they want to offer, right? So I feel like your course is such a great way for them to start to learn how can they actually not only create it, but start to live in alignment with who and what that is. And I love your unapologetic nature. It's so true. I mean, people get really squeamish around money. And it's like, just because you don't have a big corporate name behind you doesn't mean you don't deserve to earn that money in exchange for your value or your energy. So such an important lesson. And the last thing I wanted to mention on that really struck a chord with me, Teddy Roosevelt had this big saying, the long and short of it, to keep it very, simple, is that if you don't get in the ring yourself, you have no right to criticize the person in the ring. And I keep that in mind constantly, no matter what I am putting out in keynote form, workshop form, and the ways that I coach and the ways that I write. I mean, anything that I put out there, I remember always that the way that people react is on them. It's not on me. And if they don't have the courage to step into the ring and to do the same kind of work, they don't get to criticize it either, right?
Amen.
So yeah, so I feel like that's a great place for us to stop. Now, can you please tell everyone how can they find out more about your course, and then of course where to follow you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm at Jamie Hess, and DMs are always open. I love talking to people. And then my website is meetjamiehess.com, and you can learn more about my keynote speaking and also my brand ninja coaching course.
Awesome, Jamie. This was so fun. I mean, you and I have so much in common, and it's actually hilarious when you meet someone and then you
I
realize all
know.
these commonalities. I mean, life is so beautiful how it connects people in this way. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.